were surprised it didn't happen sooner. Some were surprised it happened at all. But after a long struggle, the UK's Boris Johnson has lost his grip on power and on the Conservative Party. After a series of scandals, ranging from illicit parties during lockdown to taxpayer-funded renovations, it was the hiring of a known sex offender as Deputy Chief Whip that led to the resignations of 2 senior cabinet members, which sparked a mass exodus of many more ministers. As new candidates throw their hat into the ring to replace Johnson's party leader and Prime Minister, the United Kingdom is entering new territory. Who will be the next Prime Minister of the UK, and will they be able to regain the support of the people to win an election that could come sooner rather than later? What will Boris Johnson's legacy be? And what's next for the United Kingdom?
So much to unpack, but let's begin with the most trivial and perhaps the most difficult question of all. What is next for the United Kingdom? Gentlemen, you know the rules. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance, and we pick up the debate right after. So, Phil, please take the lead.
Oh, what's next for the United Kingdom? Well, sadly, your guess might be as good as mine, but what I hope is next for the United Kingdom is going to be a true Conservative government, one that is not blindsided by this green agenda nonsense, which is absolutely not what true blue Conservative voted for in the first place. As for who comes after Boris, well, we've already seen there are 9 people in the race. I'm not entirely sure whether or not any of them are much better than Boris, but it's got to be better than Sir Keir Starmer, that's for sure.
Okay. Jonathan, your take?
Well, what's next for the United Kingdom is 2 more years of Conservative rule. And what we've seen from the candidates so far is that they are accepting the extreme positions that the Conservative Party has adopted under Boris Johnson in the last couple of years. No one is challenging so far the Rwanda deportations of refugees to Britain. No one is challenging the law breaking of Britain against the EU. So I do not have great hopes the next Prime Minister, however moderate they pretend to be.
So different phrases, but not fresh ideas, if you will. Last but not least, Tom, your take?
Well, obviously, it's very disruptive for Britain to suddenly have a change of Prime Minister mid-term. There are no fixed terms in the UK. And it's not just like one person brought Boris down. It's a bit like Agatha Christie's murder on the Orient Express. They ordered it, you know. And I think also we have to step back and look at the big B word, Brexit, in the sense that even though Boris got Brexit done, it's not actually done. What does it mean? Where's Britain going? Is the next Prime Minister going to be a Brexiteer or not? Where does Britain stand in the world?
Well, I like the way it sounds, at least. And gentlemen, please feel free to interact from this point onward. So, as you all 3 of you alluded to, the candidates set to replace Boris, or at least they're going to give a fight, have their own fair amount of baggage, let it be scandals or close to Boris himself. So will it be out with the old, in with the old, so to speak, Tom?
Well, it's really hard to know. There's so many different candidates. There are different temperaments, backgrounds, and so on. This is, in a way, a continuing struggle within the British Conservative Party. It depends who takes over. It's really an open question. In fact, Ben Wallace, who was the favourite a couple of days ago, the Defence Minister, says he's not standing. And I think one reason he doesn't want to stand is that he doesn't want the job. He instead wants the possibility of becoming the next head of NATO. And he doesn't want to be British Prime Minister. It's a poison chalice. It's a difficult situation with the economy. It's a difficult situation where to take the UK at this point in history. Britain's left the EU, but it's not, hasn't got the trade deal with the United States, hasn't got the other things it was looking for. Where is the UK going? It's trying to stop being a declining power. It's not quite clear which of these candidates can, make Britain great again, if to coin a phrase from the United States.
Yeah, Phil, who can make Britain great again?
We've got a long way to go before that happen. I was going to say we've got a long way to go before that happens, ever so sadly. I find it curious, though, that Jonathan in his opening statement said no one's challenging the Rwanda flights as far as migrants and says loads of people are challenging them. That's half the problem. I'd say that the biggest issue is that no one is challenging the cost of living crisis. No one seems to be putting British people first and recognizing that people are actually struggling to heat their homes. Okay, they don't need to do it at the moment. We're in the middle of a heat wave, but winter will come. And I think anyone who knows Britain will know that winters are not kind to us here. We've got a serious problem looming and no one seems to be doing anything about it. The cost of fuel is exorbitant. People can't actually afford their shopping bills anymore. It is shocking that no one is challenging that. And yet Jonathan's worried about a few people being deported to Rwanda. Come on, Jonathan. I think they're slightly more important.
Thing to say, honestly, for heaven's sake, if you're going to have an argument, at least have one without smearing people. Come on, you're better than this, or at least I hope you are. I actually, for what it's worth,
that's not smearing. I think that's a perfectly reasonable point.
Look, talking about a few people being deported, these are human beings, for heaven's sake. So, let's just put that to one side.
And so are people who live in this country.
You can have an honest discussion without dehumanising people, for God's sake. Anyway, the point is,
I'm not dehumanising. I'm saying that your priorities are wrong.
Them.
No, but also to blame
I'm saying your priorities are wrong, and I think that's a perfectly fair point.
Well, no.
Can I just say, I also think this is a bit of a red herring as an issue at all. It's just not. It is important, obviously, but it's in fact Boris Johnson used this as a distraction from the economy, and it seems to be working because both of you are going on about a flight that never happened for some people to Rwanda, which I disagree with, by the way, but it's not important compared to the major challenges. In fact, I don't think migration is that important.
I think we can probably agree with a couple of points. Okay, the most important issue for the British electorate is obviously the cost of living crisis, and for what it's worth, I agree with what Phil was saying, that people are facing incalculable problems and personal crises over the next months and 2 years, which is going to plunge thousands of people into poverty. It's going to be a total crisis, the likes of which we have not seen in more than a generation. And that is, if the next Conservative Prime Minister, whoever it is, if they don't get a grip on that, they will lose the next election. And I think we could
one thing they could do to help with that would be abolish all of this ridiculous green nonsense.
That doesn't mean to say, however, that immigration policies are not important. You can tell that from Rishi Sunak's campaign video, in which he kind of gushes about how his family was able to come to Britain and start a new life, completely disregarding the fact that his government's policy is to deport people who seek that better life to Rwanda. It's perfectly valid for people like me to question what the Conservative candidates are talking about that, and whether they are going to actually continue that policy if they become Prime Minister. And my observation is that so far none of the candidates has come out publicly and said we will scrap this horrible policy, and that is worth considering, because the point is that the Conservative candidates are all tacking to the extremes to try and win over the Tory party selectorate. That is the sort of 10 or 20,000 people.
But they're not doing a very good job of it.
On who's going to be the next leader and therefore Prime Minister. That, by the way, is not a democratic process, in the sense that I am not a Conservative member. I have no say whatsoever in who my next Prime Minister is going to be. I'll only have a say at the next general election in 2 years after this new Prime Minister has potentially done a lot of damage.
But
that's exactly the same under when Labour, eventually when Tony Blair stood down and Gordon Brown took over. You don't think I was exactly thrilled to see that, but it's called democracy. It's how the British democratic system works. And we might not saying that like it, but it's ultimately...
Phil, you might think it's a partisan remark. It's not actually. It's a remark about how British democracy works. I think it's a perfectly reasonable point to make that if the new Prime Minister is going to be decided by a handful of thousands of people, that is not actually a healthy democratic mandate.
It's about 200,000 or 300,000.
You want to keep seeing elections.
I think there's a problem that both the main parties, Conservative and Labour, moved away from being this parliamentary democracy where the members of Parliament choose the leaders and put it in the hands of the parties. Now, party members tend to be more right-wing or more left-wing than the majority of the electorate, and hence we get Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, neither of whom are necessarily representative of the wider Conservative or Labour voter. I don't know. So it's a problem in that maybe it should be left to MPs and MPs alone alone, not to party members to choose the Prime Minister mid-term.
So is uniting the disunited kingdom even an objective of an elected premier, or is it not politically beneficial even?
I don't think it's beneficial at all. I think that that's exactly what politics is. People have their political stance, and this ridiculous notion that we've had over the past several decades now of people having to try and come together. They've never come together, but for some reason.
Kumbaya.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if people don't understand each other's politics. That's the beauty of democracy. I have a very different opinion to Jonathan, but funnily enough, he might not believe this. I enjoy debating with him.
I think we can all see that you're enjoying debating, Jonathan, and we definitely appreciate the interaction between you two. But again, Jonathan, would you want to see the new Conservative leader that, as you've mentioned, you have no say as for who would that be, trying at least to appeal to the other chunks of the public, or are you not even expecting it?
Well, of course, I would want the new Prime Minister to try and reach out to people beyond the Conservative Party. That is what any Prime Minister should do. Unfortunately, we've had a number of years where the Prime Minister has not remotely been interested in at least half of the population. You know, you had Theresa May even used to wax lyrical about uniting the country, and then only ever talked to people who supported hard Brexit in her 3 years in power. Boris Johnson's done exactly the same. So what I would want, obviously, is a one-nation Tory. That is, funnily enough, a tradition within the Conservative Party that has existed for 150 years. That is, a Conservatives who want to unite all parts of the country, unite the rich and the poor, not just be the Prime Minister for the rich. Now, obviously, we have lots of other issues happening in the Conservative Party, the culture wars, which, you know, they're trying to weaponize to secure victory. I loathe that. What I want is a Prime Minister who is actively seeking to heal divisions, trying to appeal to bits of the country where we can all agree. And of course, everyone's going to have their politics, but you can do it in a way that seeks to build consensus rather than seeks to pitch one side against another.
I also think we're missing the fact that the United Kingdom might not be united if the people are squabbling in London too much. Scotland, as we know, is wanting another independence referendum, and Northern Ireland too may want to cede.
And we can't really blame them considering the current political climate, can we, Phil?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that when people forget the idea that different opinions actually exist and there's nothing wrong with having a difference of opinion, I feel that more than ever, people are going to struggle with the concept of uniting and coming together. It boils down to respect, as far as I'm concerned. If one has the ability to respect others' opinions, they don't have to agree with them. But as long as they do that and realize that's part of the course of democracy, then I would say actually reuniting the United Kingdom is not anywhere near as difficult as some people might think.